Do you think the Knicks should move on from Tibbs?
I don't think the Knicks should move on from Tibbs right now, but I think it's okay to say that it's open that he will be on the hot seat. And I say that because expectations have changed for this team. And I think that's okay to reset those expectations. Tibbs has been trending in the right direction, but I think there are some things that you need to see do also combine with personnel, and that's on Leon Rose and Worldwide West to make sure that the personnel fits to give the Knicks the best opportunity to win a championship. But I think you need to see some innovation from his offense. I said it earlier at the top of the show, essay. 90s basketball in the age of 2025 is not going to get it done. And I'm talking about offensively and defensively. Like there is an extreme called load management that we loathe at. There is an alternative to that extreme on the opposite end, which is called physical exhaustion and being tired. And that's what we saw. We gave the stat of 770 more minutes than the opposing Indiana starting five. That's what the Knicks starting five have played more. That's equivalent of 16 and a half games more. And that can't not be the case. It's not sustainable. So I think having pressure, understanding that we don't know how our window is, but we need to see these improvements made coaching wise, schematically, in order to give us the best odds this upcoming season is an okay standard and expectation I think the Knicks should have.
The quick and obvious answer to this is that the New York Knicks should not move on from Tom Thibodeau. He has proven to be a damn good coach who has helped resurrect this franchise from basketball purgatory. And we've seen progressive improvement from this team throughout the years, getting bounced out in the first round, getting to the second round, getting to Game 7 of an Eastern Conference semifinals last year, getting into Game 6 of a conference finals this year. We've seen progression. And I'm not telling you, I mean, if you're telling me that Tom Thibodeau needs to go, I say that's being ungrateful, that's being unfair to him. That's not taking into account what he was asked to work with. This is a defensive-minded coach who is exceptional at coaching grit and establishing accountability on the part of the players. I don't know if you can dare say you'd see any team that plays harder on a night-in, night-out basis than the New York Knicks. They don't take time off. But the flip side to that is that schematically, if you're telling us Rick Carlisle was available, if you're telling us that Ty Lue was available, if you're telling us that Eric Spoelstra was available, then we have to have a conversation because it's not really about that whether or not Tom Thibodeau is a damn good coach who has done his job. It's about knowing that there's somebody out there that is just better. And when you bring up those kind of names, there is nobody in basketball circles that would tell you that Tom Thibodeau is a better coach than a Rick Carlisle, a Ty Lue, or an Eric Spoelstra. They just won't do it. Having said that, that doesn't mean that he deserves to be gone. And with them not being available, he certainly shouldn't be let go. But the other reason he shouldn't be let go is because, by and large, this is not his fault. Karl-Anthony Towns is not known as being a defensive-minded player. Jalen Brunson certainly is not that either. The New York Knicks were a liability defensively when it counted most because they didn't have the personnel. That's on Leon Rose. Leon Rose is the one that not only decided to pair those players together, and obviously Thibs had to buy in, but he was also somebody that gave up 5 first-round picks, 4 unprotected, in order to do it. So when we look at immediate accountability, you want to give credit where credit is due. You're not calling for anybody to be fired or anything like that. But if anybody has work to do this offseason, it's Leon Rose. It's not Thibs.
Who's better suited moving forward, Minnesota or New York?
I would say Minnesota because of the reasons you just articulated. They've got a superstar in Ant-Man, a star rather in Ant-Man. I'm not going to call him a superstar right now. He's got superstar talent, but he's got to show up in big games like a Game 7. But I look at the pieces around him, and essentially, if you hadn't run into Oklahoma City, who could you not beat? Think about that. If the Minnesota Timberwolves were in the finals, we would have looked at them and said, they could beat any of these teams. If you had Minnesota going up against a plethora of other teams, we said they could have beat them. Oklahoma City is just a different animal right now. There's no doubt about that. But we just sat up there and said that the East is wide open next season with the plethora of teams that are available, whether it's Boston to a lesser degree without Jason Tatum, Cleveland and Indy, who's already here, Orlando, etc. We look at a plethora of teams within the Eastern Conference and we say to ourselves, we saw Karl-Anthony Towns a bit gimpy. We saw them struggle defensively. Eminem, you know that. Compare their team last year defensively to what you saw this year. There was a precipitous drop-off. And so when we look at it from that standpoint, we look at Minnesota. You've got length. You've got cats, whether it's Anaya Reeves or McDaniels. You've got some teams you got a team that was pretty elite defensively with a dude in Ant-Man. You look at Finch, for example, even though he can coach, you did find yourself saying, why do you have Ant-Man on the ball so much in this series against Oklahoma City? Get him off at the top of the floor. Make sure you put him in a position where he can capitalize off his mid-range game or what have you. These are the kind of things that you have to do, and those things weren't done. But I just look at the personnel on Minnesota in terms of their youth, their size, with Ant-Man and what he can bring to the table and what have you. I don't think there is strapped financially. I don't want to say financially because A-Rod and Mark Lurie, you got to see with them. But I just look at this situation in terms of the draft capital that the New York Knicks have given up, Jay, and that's what I'm stuck on right now. The limitation of movement because of so many assets that they gave up.
I would say, I think you're wrong, and here's why.
Okay.
We
Right.
all agree that the East is wide open. Wouldn't that make the Knicks better suited to move forward? When I start looking at the Western Conference, Dallas is coming. Number
I
one
agree.
pick, Cooper Flag, Kyrie Irving coming back. I mean, Anthony Davis, Klay Thompson, the pieces they have, they could be right there. Houston has dogs. They're going to be right there. I don't know if Minnesota beats Golden State if Steph Curry playing. That feels like a completely different matchup to me. When I start looking at where Denver is with Nikola Jokic, and that dude's a walking triple-double, 45,
He needs help,
18,
though.
19. Jamal Murray, it's just like the West is loaded. OKC right there again with talent. That's why I think every former player or people that know basketball sat there when we heard Ant saying, I'm going to be just fine. I'm excited. We're like, we don't know if you're going to be back here. Like your road, you came on the show the next day and said, do you know how hard the road is in the Western Conference? I heard Wendy say that we don't even know what's going to happen with San Antonio, with Wemby and De'Aaron Fox. You imagine if they get Giannis? So I'm just looking at the Eastern Conference. If it is wide open, I think Detroit, Orlando, Cleveland's going to be there. New York, obviously, Indiana, who's in NBA Finals, going to be there. But I still think it's the best odds for the Knicks in that conference as opposed to the loaded conference in the West, for sure.
I agree with Jay Will, too, on that one. Because and in addition to that, the Wolves got some questions this year in terms of guys being restricted free agents and what that's going to look like moving forward. I just think and I guess you could say the Knicks have a few, but they have less. If they could roll with the starting five for the foreseeable future and then fill out around them. And so I think they have a better shot in terms of continuity, in terms of the conference that they're in. I didn't have an issue. I'm glad you brought up that sound, Jay, but I didn't have a ton of an issue with it from Ant because he has been so honest and candid, and that is what has endeared us to a degree. But that does not mean you take for granted the ability to win. I feel like that was a bet on himself, and everybody else sitting back is like winning is hard, which I think he would agree with. But I got to agree, though, when you look at the Western Conference, and Dallas, to me, we talk about big moments and big trades through this season. We all saw that trade go down, and initially the favor was pointed toward Dallas in terms of who they could be in the Western Conference. So to me, the Knicks are better suited moving forward.
What's your reaction to that report?
Well, listen, I'm not going to say it's inaccurate because you heard some things about folks not being on the same page defensively. But I was glad that Jalen Brunson said what he said in that post-game conference because I think he encapsulates what a lot of people feel about Karl-Anthony Towns. I remember years ago when Jimmy Butler was in Minnesota and he uttered some negative words that people attached to Karl-Anthony Towns, essentially thought the team was soft overall and it was problematic and that Tom Thibodeau pacified and catered to Cat a little bit too much because Tom Thibodeau was the coach in Minnesota at that particular moment in time. But to know Karl-Anthony Towns is to know he's a really good guy. He does have a great personality. He is one of the greatest shooting big men we've ever seen. The brother can really, really stroke the basketball, no doubt about that. And we get that part. And he's not a bad person. He's not a bad person at all. Really, really nice guy. And he's been through a lot. And that's saying a lot, because sometimes when you go through the kind of things that he's lost to, with the deaths in his family and the aftermath of COVID and during COVID and all of that stuff, there's a lot to point to applaud him for the man that he is and the basketball player that he is as well. But he is limited in terms of his post-game, his post-presence. He really, really is a shooting big man. And even though in a perfect world, I would want to hold on to Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns to get the likes of a Giannis. If I had to give up a Karl-Anthony Towns to get Giannis, I would not hesitate. I would not hesitate. That man give you 30 and 12 a night. If you got an opportunity to get Giannis Antetokounmpo, I don't give a damn who you have to give up to get him, you do it. That's how I feel about Giannis in this stage point.
Okay.
I'm not saying Jalen Brunson, because obviously he's got to play with somebody, because we've seen Giannis lose, and he's lost, in the playoffs, even though him and Damian Lillard have never been healthy together for the playoffs, albeit for 1 or 2 games. We saw him win a championship with Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday, and those guys, and we also saw him come up short. So we recognize that. But I think the talent and the veracity that comes along with the talent that is Giannis Antetokounmpo on a New York stage, outside of Jalen Brunson, who I think is pretty close to untouchable at this point, you do what you have to do to get your hands on Giannis, no matter what assets you have to surrender.
Jay, should the Knicks move on from Cat?
I think it depends upon what they can get. Could you get a Jaren Jackson if Giannis isn't available? Could you get a Jarrett Allen? Are there other assets out there that maybe could be better built for what Thibs wants to do defensively? I think that's the question that Leon Rose and Upper Brass will be asking themselves. Because Cat, look, I've said this before. Cat's offense is like art, right? But defense is like math. And in order to win in the playoffs, you need math. Math helps you win in the playoffs. I mean, you obviously need a guy to carry you offensively too, consistently. I would like to just say this real quick. I respect Jalen Brunson a lot for coming to the defense of his brother, and I've known Cat since he's been 14 years old. Cat understood what this opportunity was, considering his first in-runs with Thibs in Minnesota. And you heard a lot about some of the expectations and standards that Thibs had for him. And when I talked to him about it one time at a college basketball game, courtside, during halftime, he talked about all the things he's learned and how much he's grown and how he feels ready for this. So I give him a lot of kudos, because he embraced that, coming back home, the pressure to come back to New Jersey, New York, to live up to expectations. I mean, just look at the flood of people right now, even though they got to the Eastern Conference Finals, talking about trading him. But at the end of the day, just like Stephen A. said, if it's him and some other assets, you can get a Giannis tied to a 5-year contract, because you only get him with an extension, Stephen A., right? It's 5 years with Jalen Brunson. I don't know how you don't take that and you try to build around it. And you got to swing at it. There's not too many generational players like Giannis come up every once in a while. You got to take it.
I think we all agree in how good Giannis is and having to explore. I am under the impression that unless Giannis is heavily leaning to want to be in New York, there may not be enough in the chest to make that happen.
There's no other way.
Right.
There's no other way than him saying, I want to be there.
This could end up being a moot point, right? But we'll see how it plays out. What I will say, though, is, you guys, I typically, personal basketball philosophy, am out in year one of combining stars. I know we've been picky with that word superstar, so I'm going to go with stars, all NBA caliber guys, multiple all-star type of guys. The thing I have to give Cat is that it worked in year one with Jalen Brunson, which I think is a credit to both of them. But when Cat arrived in New York, he made it very clear that in his mind, this was Jalen Brunson's team, and he was joining this operation to help the Knicks build on what they had already done. Maybe I'm altruistic. Somebody might be rolling their eyes at me. But if nothing changes this summer, can you grow? And
Well,
I know Cat has been in the league. We know who he is, but can you grow? And I think the the final Eastern Conference Series, SA, I'm gonna let you rock, revealed room for growth on a number of levels from this New York Knicks organization. And so I guess that's what I'm left with.
Wanna try to boast at what I look like. Think I'm gonna try to wear, I pull up long range. Jimmy with the heat, I'm on fire. It's NBA over here,